knowledge and information. So right now, the way that it works is that, first of all, Florida is the largest concealed weapons program in the country. We've got about 2.1 individuals that have one of our permits. And so the process works is that you have to apply through the Department of Agriculture, and then you have to go and get your background. We have to do the background check, which means you need fingerprints. So what we have seen since really the last couple years, really since COVID, a 200% increase in applicants. And a couple of reasons for that. We've always see a spike in applicants right around elections, because they are scared of us Democrats taking their guns. So they go out and they apply for their concealed permits close to not so much gubernatorial elections as presidential, thinking that, you know, somebody up in Washington, D.C. is going to take their guns. So everybody applies. Then there was a tremendously large spike during COVID, because again, everybody, you know, we got to form our militias. You know, what if government is going to come in and, you know, we can't do our normal businesses, and we got to protect our homes because law enforcement is staying home, whatever their excuses were. You saw a significant increase during that time period. And what is interesting is that in the Florida statutes, you know, we always hear that they keep gutting this trust fund and that trust fund. And, you know, we all worked on getting Florida Forever money. And we all worked on the doc stamps to put money into the environment. And they continue to gut those trust funds and put them into wherever pots of dollars they want. The only trust fund in Florida that cannot be touched per statute is the Concealed Weapons Trust Fund, because the NRA created it. And so they never wanted that touched. So what they are trying to do, so there's two things that they could have done. First of all, we do not ever call it constitutional carry. That is their terminology. That is them saying, I've got a constitutional right to carry my firearm wherever I want and wear it however I want. So constitutional carry is their terminology for bullshit. So excuse my language. So there are two ways that they are looking at this perspective. Either one, which is what they're doing on permitless carry, which means that they would never have had to go through the Department of Agriculture. In the last 2 years, last 2 fiscal years of my administration, we denied 11,000 applicants. And that was not based on them not filling out the paperwork. That is based on them failing background checks. All 11,000 of those individuals would be allowed to carry concealed without a permit. So that means that right now, if you wanted to carry concealed, like any of us wanted to put it in our purses, we'd have to get a permit for it. If you want to put it in your glove box, you'd have to put a permit on it. If you wanted to put it on your belt loop, you know, with your jacket over it, you'd have to get a permit. They're saying no more. You can carry your firearm concealed without having a certain permit to do so. And their arguments are going to be, well, you have to get a background check anyhow when you purchase your firearm. We all know that is not true, that there are firearms that are being stolen from cars on a consistent basis. There is an illegal trade on guns. There's the loophole that is from buying at gun shows that doesn't require background checks. So there can be a lot of people that own firearms that would not qualify to conceal it. That's dangerous. That is really dangerous. And you're hearing from police across our state how this is dangerous for them, that if they're going into a situation and they're seeing violence, they don't know who the good guy and who the bad guy is. And so they're going to have to shoot and ask questions later in a situation. And that is dangerous for our citizens. And that's certainly dangerous for the police officers. The other thing is interesting, which I'm sure they have not even thought through on their arguments, is that we have reciprocity here in the state of Florida for almost the entire South, maybe goes a little bit further outside the South, because we have such a stringent program here that if you have your concealed permit from here, you can travel to other states with your permit. Now, that's not going to be the case, and they probably will lose their reciprocity, or they can be stupid enough to feel like they don't need a permit and travel across state lines into another state and feel like they can conceal. And now you potentially are getting yourself arrested in another state because you haven't gone through the permit process. The other thing that I know that they first were talking about, which I would keep an eye out for, because the extreme on the right, who are the Second Amendment before anything else, really think that even on those notions is not far enough, that they want to go to open carry, which means you can literally be walking down Monroe Street with an assault rifle on you and no one can stop you. They will be able to stop you going into buildings and things like that, but walking around the street, walking around Duval Street, doesn't, you can be sitting, and I feel like we're going to be back into, world, back in, I know Israel has, everybody's walking around with guns and other places like that do that. Watch out for that. I haven't heard necessarily that they are going to do it, but I don't trust them, and wouldn't put it past them to, while we are sitting and fighting over here about permitless carry, that they slip in language over here and do a completely open carry. So I think it's really going to be important for us to continue to monitor what's going on. So that's kind of like the lay of the land. And just to give you another example, we told everybody that over the last couple of years after January 6th, where all these guys are being arrested for insurrection, there's about 20, there was 30, first 26, and I think there was 8 more, so about 34 individuals that we suspended their licenses. That would not be the case. Those individuals who are wearing ankle monitors for literally trying to overturn democracy would still be allowed to conceal carry. And so this is how backwards all these things are. And this entire program was created by Republicans. So it wasn't like I came in and, changed things around and denied, and went all crazy that they had. In fact, when we came in, Adam Putnam was over the statutory timeframe to approve of concealed permits. You're supposed to do within 90 days of getting an application. You're supposed to review it and get back to the applicant within 90 days. His average was 96 days. So we came in and we cleaned house. As you all know, I put Gwen Graham's husband in charge of it, and we worked overtime to catch up on the backlog. And so we were able to actually become more effective and efficient in our program, which made them even more angry, which, that's on them. But that's the situation, the lay of the land. Do I think that we are going to be able to stop it? I wish I could tell you yes. But I got to be honest, we don't have the votes. We don't have the votes to stop it. I mean, I don't know a single Republican who's going to vote no, out of the fear of DeSantis or leadership. And I just don't think that there's enough of us in elected positions to really be able to maneuver and to stop it. And so it's going to come to our advocacy. And I have said this, I've had conversations with Fred Guttenberg, I've had conversations with David Hogg, and trying to come up with a larger strategy, because it's not just permitless carry. We're going to be dealing with, again, them coming in and changing voting rights. They're going to be coming back in and stripping away more abortion rights. And so there are so many of us inside the Democratic Party that we always focus on our issue. We're going to go up and fight on abortion rights and road rallies. Or if you care, like the March for Our Lives kids, it's just about the gun situation. If you are NAACP and some of our Black organizations, it's more on, well, now there's just so much. Like, I don't even know where to start on all of those issues. We have to start being the party that brings all of our activists together. And that we are certainly greater in numbers, because at the end of the day, that if we're starting to silo off our activists only on their issues, instead of having the broader banner of, this is not Florida, this is not who we are, this is not, I was born and raised here, so many of you have been here in our state for generations too. This is not who we are. And he is taking us into such a dangerous direction and so anti-democracy, and try to paint it as a bigger messaging, because we're not going to be able to win on the siloed issues. And I hate saying that, because you all know I am such a fierce fighter, and I am ready for any fight any day of the week on the issues that matter to the people of our state. I just don't know if we can win any of this until we come together and show that the numbers are not with them. And now, granted, DeSantis doesn't care, because he feels that he just won on a 19-point victory, and he's taking this, freedom blueprint platform to the country. So he doesn't care where the polling is, because we all know that if you poll abortion, it's 70% that agree with us on our position. If you look at any of these issues that get onto the ballot, 60 to 70% agree with us on our issues: class size, restoration of civil rights, fight for 15, cannabis. The people are with us, but we haven't found a way to get them to vote for us. And that is one of the biggest things and obstacles we as Democrats are going to have to face and kind of go through. So we got to look right now, organized, and make sure people understand this should not be a DNR issue. This is common sense, and we're going to have to pull in some of those moderate Republicans, not the legislators, but moderate Republicans who are out in the ethos, those suburban moms that are going to feel that this is going to actually create more danger into their communities, that the police who, and not the Sheriff's Association, because the Sheriff's Association is scared to death of making Ron DeSantis mad. So you're going to have to pull off some of those other sheriffs that don't care, that may not get reelected, or some of the police chiefs, or some of just law enforcement in general, to kind of continue to elevate. And I think the other thing that we need to be doing, we have to get back to storytelling. And this is what I said to Fred and to David. I said, why we were able to pass gun reform in 2018, because there was a story to be told, because they understood that this was impacting them as high school kids. Fred lost his daughter. And so if we stop getting away from the storytelling, they're just going to think of it as political, dicta, and not really understand what impact this is making on the communities, and building a broader coalition of not just Democrats, because as Democrats alone, we're not going to be able to stop this.
I was told that when Adam Putnam was the AG commissioner, that you were talking about the backlog of permits. And I was told that there were 6,000 permits that were never gone through, and you kind of put a hold on those as well. And now it looks like if this thing passes, that they'll be able to skate through. And you had talked about also that this also includes the fact that they will not have to train.
Correct. Yes, that's another part. So yes, so basically what had happened, which as you all remember from my 2018 campaign, why my 3 W's, weed, water, and weapons, was such the weapons part. It was because it was after Parkland. Adam Putnam made it very clear that he was the do boy for the NRA, and allowed for 13 months background checks to not be done. And so of those that we went back and looked at, there was few hundred of people that fell through the cracks, that got their permits, that would not have otherwise gotten it if they'd actually gone through the background check. And so, yes, so we came in and stopped all of that, made sure everybody got a complete and thorough background check. And again, that it's able to be done in a timely manner if the office was run correctly. Now it's not going to be, but it was for 4 years. But yes, and that's part of it. It is the training course. It is a 2-day course that you have to go through in order to apply for concealed weapons permit. So basically it was 3-step prong. You had to go through the training course, how to fill out the application, how to get the background check through your fingerprints. That training course, and I have even advocated over the last 4 years, where I found loopholes even in the current program, that we should be, so every 7 years your concealed permit gets as it was 7 years, it has to get renewed, but there's no requirement from in those 7 years to have gone back through training. And I've been very open. I have a weapon. I have a gun that I inherited from my grandfather, and I keep it in the glove compartment of my car, and that's where it is sat for 10 years. I should never be allowed to take out that gun and think that I'm never going to use it for self-defense, because I haven't shot it in probably 5 years. I haven't cleaned it. And granted, like I'm doing those things, but like I just use myself as an example. And I had said that we should be reducing instead of 7 years to 5 years, because you can't retain fingerprints more than 5 years. And so to reduce it to 5 years and make everybody go through another training course every 5 years to make sure that you have shot your gun. Because look, if you are not comfortable with the gun, you're more likely to hurt yourself than you are the perpetrator who's coming after you. And so that training is really essential. And it's not even so much training as it is that the 2-day course goes through the laws in Florida, making sure you understand where you can bring it in, where you can't bring it in, making sure you understand where you can store it. As an attorney, you're taught, what considered concealed, that it's an arm's length away from you. And so you start going back through the law, and then on day 2, you actually bring in your weapon and you do a shooting practice out, in their facilities. That would stop. You would not have to do that. And that's even more dangerous, that these individuals are going to be carrying their firearm with no training whatsoever. And what are we hoping? That there's not going to be an incident. What I have advised David and Fred as we're going through this, one, I've told them storytelling is going to be essential, but also data, because they keep saying that this is going to make us more safe in the state of Florida. They keep talking about safety, safety, safety. Well, show us the data. And I'm sure that whether it's Everytown or Moms or Giffords, that some organization has done the research to show if in fact you have gone to either permitless carry or open carry, what that does to mass shootings or even violence in general. And so I've asked them to kind of look into some of those stuff so we can start putting, again, data out there, because if we start seeing data that says any state that's moved in that direction, you've seen a 10% increase in gun violence, well, then that kills their entire argument about the safety aspects. So we got to be kind of a multifaceted approach to this. 1 is data. 2 is those personal stories. And most importantly, and I know you all know this, it's the grassroots. It's going and talking to your neighbors, not making this a D versus R thing, but go talk to your neighbors, be into our communities, and find those allies in the Republican Party that may be willing to be vocal about it, or just Republicans in general about all of this. And I am sure that there's plenty of Republicans, just rank and file, people out in our communities that see this as the wrong direction.
Jessica Brayson asks, can we as activists reach out to large businesses and demand that they require the private business remain a gun-free zone?
Sure. That's how, actually, it's funny enough, that's how, in fact, I met Fred Guttenberg. It is after 2018, after obviously Parkland and I got into this race, he had gone on to a very large mission of looking where the money comes from, and that understood that we weren't moving the needle in Washington, D.C. just by mere advocacy. So start exposing where the money comes from and who's holding on to the purse strings. And so he started going after the banks, asking them to stop banking members of the NRA, gun manufacturers. And Wells Fargo came back to him and said they don't get involved in politics and they don't take political positions. Well, 6 weeks later, they shut down my campaign account because I was taking cannabis money. And so they did not believe in legalization and medical marijuana. So they shut down my campaign account. And my campaign manager at the time was from Parkland and says, you need to talk to Fred Guttenberg. So yes, going to those corporations and asking them to be part of this conversation. And if in fact enough corporations come out and say, this is actually more dangerous, maybe there's a way too, that if the corporations dig in more because they're not listening to the people, maybe they'll be listening to where their money comes from.
Okay, Valerie Brandt Wilson. Oh, by the way, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Valerie Brandt Wilson says, how do we best educate the public about the danger of passing the paperless permit? Do you recommend town hall meetings, editorial, or something else?
All of the above. This is a full court press. It has to be all of the above. But I think that it's really important where the climate is today. And this is the direction and then the advice, take it or leave it, that I'm giving to Democrats across the state. We have to start playing smart. That if we go into start that the world is on fire and start yelling and screaming and doing all these things, we're going to get nowhere. We've got to start playing it smart and messaging smart. So I think that if you're doing, town halls, truly listen, because that's half the problems that we hear all the time from people on the ground. We go to town halls or we talk to an elected official and all they want to do is talk at us. And if we're going to do these town halls, it's really important that we listen, because look, if at the end of the day, and I'm going to say something really, really crazy, if at the end of the day, we are hearing from not our Democratic activists, but we are hearing from citizens in our communities who say, you know what, I'm okay with this, then we've got to understand that we are not with the people, and that it may be the activists that are one place, but if we are truly not representing the people anymore, we're never going to win more Democrats into office to stop things like this. So we've got to make sure that if we're doing town halls, that we are truly listening to what the people in our communities are wanting. And the same thing for editorials. Make sure that it's based on storytelling and facts, not just, hyperbole, throw things out there to draw an emotion, because we're not going to get enough people to move on this. And so I think it's all of the above. And I certainly think that it's getting on to our Facebooks, into our Twitters, into our social media platforms, and asking. And maybe there's even a world, which I think that this is going to be part of how we eventually win, is start sending out. And I don't know everybody's resources and the clubs and the caucuses and where you all are, but maybe there's a text message that goes out and says, we want to hear from you. Let us know what your thoughts are on this, and start kind of interacting already with the citizens. Or if you would like to talk to somebody to get more informed on this issue, have people that in those communities, make sure we're tying them to, if you're coming from a citizen from Brevard, that you're putting them somebody within Brevard, and you're making sure that they're connecting with somebody in their own communities. But I think it's all of it, and it's educating, it's making sure you've got the facts, and that we are not, again, losing credibility by saying that the sky is falling, but be pragmatic about how we're approaching this, knowing that he's got a 19-point win that he's going to every day of the week hold his hat on. And so we've got to make sure that we're getting to the people and say, look, this is what happens when you've got a 19-point win, but talk to us about where you are, and educate.
Where can we find those stats that we talked about earlier, about the denied applicants?
So I actually tweeted that last week. That was on my Twitter. I put out, what day was it? It was sometime last week. I tweeted it with the actual chart that shows how many I denied. So I tweeted it on 6 days ago. And I put you're not gonna be able to see it on here, but I put on there too, the actual data pulled from the Department of Agriculture. So it is an official document that shows how many that were denied, renewed, in each county. And so and you'll see on there too, that there's an overall that were denied. That's not accurate to those numbers, because some of those people that were denied because they didn't finish the applications, and I don't think that that would be appropriate to include them in those numbers. It's the people that actually got denied because they failed background checks.
Mary Savage says, learning to use a firearm safely is good for those who are able. It takes away from the stigma and fear, but the mental health and stress factor of this society is deeply concerning. And she's concerned that it's deliberate, and out of chaos will come order.
Oh, Ron DeSantis loves chaos. Like there is no doubt about that. Let's put our higher ed system into free fall. Let's put K through 12 into free fall. I was on the phone earlier today with a mother whose kids go to elementary school or middle school in Tallahassee. And she said they had a book fair last week, and half the books that they had previously sold, they couldn't put out because they hadn't been reviewed. That's chaos. That's chaos, what we're seeing, what's happening in our schools, yelling at our librarians, going after our pharmacists, saying, threatening them about an abortion pill. He loves this chaos, because with the problem that we have to start understanding is that they've got the manpower to deal with the chaos. We don't. And so as they throw things every which direction, we as Democrats are squirrel ball and go and trying to follow around, and then we mute ourselves because we are all over the place chasing these balls, and that's not effective. And so he loves chaos because he wins in chaos. He's got a microphone, and we are all just trying to stay afloat. This week it is, I talked to Fentress Driscoll tonight, and she's like, Nikki, we are in the middle of committee weeks that we're having to deal with the general session aspects. And now we're going to have a special session, and we have all these bills that they're putting through on special session, including having to deal with our regular organization session. That's intentional. We've got 35 members in the House and 12 in the Senate, and that is it. They've got staff, and they've got campaign teams, and they've got, all of their senators and all of their House members. They can deal with, okay, Senator so-and-so, you are going to only tackle this bill. We have to respond to everything because we're just outnumbered. So yes, he loves chaos. It is going to be on us to be disciplined, of not taking the bait on every single issue and figuring out what is right. I'm going to say something too that I personally have to tone myself, because that crime bill that he proposed last week is without a doubt in the wrong direction. As a past public defender, him coming and saying that a judge can overturn a death penalty sentence and not have a unanimous by putting sex offenders as death penalty, changing how we're dealing with the bonding and bailing out, without a doubt the wrong direction. But if we attack him, then he will utilize in the next election that Democrats are anti-law and order, and that we don't care about the safety of our communities. And so and we know that if he wants that bill, he's going to get that bill. We've got to play smart so that we don't get ourselves into a box in the next election and get ourselves into a situation where we're having to now play defense again, because he's saying that we are anti-law and order and anti-safety in our communities. So we got to play smart. They're going to continue dangling things in front of us, but we got to make sure that we're organized and very on message and on point.
Joan asks, please comment on the different ways law enforcement treats white people with guns and Black people and brown people with guns.
I don't think I need to tell you all the answer to that.
We still, you would think, but it still needs to be said.
Of course it's different. And I mean, and I always take it directly, and I know I can't stand in so many of your shoes. And so I can only go from my own personal experiences as a past public defender. I know what my clientele looks like versus, what the actual community makeup was. And I use, cannabis as a direct reference point. Is I know that all of my white friends smoked all the time. I didn't see any of them in jail or getting arrested. But let me tell you, my Black client that lives in a poorer community, I was seeing him inside of my dockets every couple of months. So of course, and that is just a very small microcosm, but and now we're going to get rid of diversity training. So it's bad, because we know that more Black and brown will die under these types of lack of regulations. Because again, if you're going into a community, into a Black community, and you're seeing two individuals with guns, and you're shooting first and asking later, and not knowing who the good guy and the bad guy in the situation is, and they may just assume that they both are bad, unfortunately. So I think all of us know the answer to that unfortunately guns are going to be no different, and are no different of how law enforcement treats the racial inequities in our country.
And can you address another topic? The assault on Black history in our schools and our colleges. Just so that you know, I just was told that they are quietly dialing back the DE&I training, and even all of the professors at the local schools, the local colleges that are near me. And UF is a huge nightmare. Where do you begin? Where do you begin?
This is how I began. Because I had an actual interesting 2 weeks ago, I was on a panel in Tampa. It was myself, Joe Gruters, as y'all know, is the head of the Republican Party of Florida, and two reporters. And it was a 30-minute panel, and we are talking about all the issues of the day. And it was the same week that we got in the numbers that it was like $34 million that was higher ed is using for DEI. And so that was before his announcement last week. And so what I said to Joe, I said, Joe, let me explain to you, because he couldn't explain what woke means. He has no idea what any of these things that they're all talking about means. And I said, Joe, let me tell you where diversity training came from and why that was so important. It came from your corporations and from your businesses. They are the ones who wanted to make sure they had a diverse workforce. They wanted to make sure they had a diverse workforce, one in particular, because the fact that they have a diverse clientele. And so they're looking for people to hire in these different, whether it's a corporation or law firm, businesses, whatever, that are well-rounded, that understand how to interact with the diverse communities, that know how to service different interests. If in fact, you all go forward with this, not only are our kids going to be graduating that are going to be at a disadvantage, getting types of jobs whose businesses are looking for a diverse workforce and trained to know how to deal with others that don't act or sound like you. But two, those companies are not going to come into the state of Florida. And so now you're going to lose job opportunities. So I've been able to kind of couch this in an economic perspective. Because let me tell you, when the president of New College got up on stage last week and said, did you all know that there's a whole lot of scholarships out there that only Black people can apply for? That's got to change. Well, the majority of our country is still white. And so unless you have a heart, you may be like, yeah, that's right. Why can't I apply for that? And so we've got to look at it from a lens of how do we win the arguments with people that aren't already with us? And you have to look at it from almost an economic perspective as well. But this is a big problem. And I will tell you firsthand how it's already impacting. I still sit on the University of Florida Board of Trustees for the law school. And last Friday, we had a meeting in Palm Beach County. And there's about 50 of us that sit on this board. And I've known a whole lot of them from either from law school or in just interacting in the legal profession. I don't know if they're DRRs. I know the ones that contributed to my campaign, but I don't know I don't know their party affiliation outside of that. The dean of the law school is there. She gives a presentation about where we are as UF rankings, where we're going to be when the news and reports come out in March, how the incoming class looks, what are their LSAT scores and GPAs. And so she's going through all of this. And for those who know anything about law schools, they don't hire a lot because typically your professors come in there and they stay for 10, 15, 20, in some cases 30, 40 years. And so you don't always have a lot of turnover in your law schools, and you certainly don't always have, and maybe there's visiting professors and things of that nature, but hired new faculty is always small. She was excited. She's like, well, we've got 4 prospects, incredible professors that we have gotten the money for that we think will really add a lot of benefits to our law students. She's like, but 3 of them won't commit to us because of the political climate of our state. That's a reality of what's happening. And this poor dean is trying to say what her response was to them, saying, well, here at UF, we have academic freedom and we've got a president that encourages it. And but at the end of the day, I know she's saying it trying to say it with a straight face, but I know deep down, she knows that this is a major problem. And we're starting to see that across our colleges and universities, that you're not going to be able to pull in those those academias that are just not going to come here on the fear that they're not going to be able to teach. This is going to be devastating, and Derek will understand this. I also believe that what's going to hurt next is our student governments, because unfortunately and fortunately, that, you know, when I was student body president, I had, I think, like $17 million, give or take, that we were allocating. Good 85% of that went to student organizations that their inherent purpose is diversity. You know, I can guarantee you that right now, Black History Month, that is being put on by the Black Student Union, a majority, if not all of that money, comes from student government. And their general counsels at each of these universities are going to tell their student body presidents, you can't do this anymore. And the student body president isn't going to most likely be a law student that is going to really understand that that's not accurate or how to challenge that. So that's going to be everything from our institutes of Black culture that is, you know, partially of student government money, to, you know, Muslim Student Union, Pride Student Union. I mean, all of these things. So all of your experiences at why people want to go to a higher ed system is the education both in and outside the classroom. He is going to be hitting on both fronts. And that is going to be, that's where my heart went last week when that announcement went, is what impacts are that going to have on our students not being able to be exposed to all of those opportunities on campus. But we're going to need the students. I mean, I spoke to a student on an hour on Friday who's at UCF and says, we need our student governments across the state to start to rally and to start making sure that whether or not they are conservative or they are liberal, this impacts everybody across the board, and you should want academic freedom and these opportunities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pat Weber Sones asks, is there a possibility of having a statewide conference of Dems and like-minded state organization to join hands to support our individual efforts under a loose but effective umbrella with a wide reach? Wouldn't that be difficult because we don't have a chair yet?
We don't have a chair. So that's one problem. Sure, we can always do things. You know, I mean, that's absolutely. The question is, who's going to start to put it together and really start to coordinate that. You know, like I said, I can give my advice, and I'm here always to roll up my sleeves and to get to work and to do what is ever necessary. That's why I keep telling everyone, you know, I'm giving these ideas out to each of these groups that are calling me, and I keep saying it can't be siloed. You got to work together. And so there is absolutely an opportunity. I don't know if we're gonna be able to pull it off before the end of session necessarily. But certainly if there was a call to march into Tallahassee from all of our groups to protect democracy. Can you imagine if you know, the League of Women Voters, those that are involved in the gun violence, you know, realm, those that are involved with the NAACP, the Urban League, you know, our Planned Parenthood, all of our different activist groups came together. How forceful would that be for them to see that you've got people all over the state, and it can't be under the Democratic banner? It's got to make sure that the umbrella is large enough that everybody feels that they have a voice in the conversation. But sure, anything is possible.
And my last question, what are you working on now?
Well, that's like what I'm not working on.
I know, right?
I
just want to say, a matter of privilege, I was so proud that even though you lost the primary for the gubernatorial elections, you did travel up and down Florida trying to get Democrats elected. And I was proud that you did come to Marion County and speak speak to us. And I just want to tell you that means the world to us. But yes, what are you working on? Where can we see you next?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that, because I fundamentally believe that, you know, if you're fighting for an issue and you're fighting for good and doing right, an election result shouldn't change that. And so if you truly care about those issues, you continue to show up. And so that's why right after the primary, we started Won't Back Down, to help with lifting up so many candidates from our school board members all the way up to our congressional candidates, and helping out wherever Charlie and Val needed me to be, because I think that was important for our party to see, and hopefully be an example for future elections for people to say, look, just because you lose doesn't mean your voice isn't important to the conversation. So that was really important to me, and I will continue to do that. So I'm working on kind of three fronts, actually. So Won't Back Down is still very much active, to help with, again, down ballots, because a lot of things that I heard along on the campaign trail and saw firsthand as a candidate and then helping others, there is a really big disconnect, between candidates and how to get elected. And so many of our candidates, and unfortunately, so many of our women, and more so women of color, don't have the same access to the powers that be, to House victory, Senate victory, whether it's a D trip from Washington, D.C., the party apparatus, and they're left out there to die. And too many times they don't even know who to go to ask simple questions, of filing requirements, or how to put up a website. Or I remember talking to a candidate who didn't understand what blue-green algae was and what the issue was red tide. And so the educational aspect of things. And so I really feel like some of the things that I really want to be working on is making sure that our candidates feel supported. Throughout, my heart broke for our 3 cabinet candidates this last election cycle.
Agreed.
They were left to die. There was no support. There was no lifting up. Whether or not you agreed with every one of their policy positions, they were ours, and that shouldn't matter. And the fact that we had, 2 women of color on that ticket, really 3 with Val, and nobody knew about it. No one even knew that was happening in our state. And I was on text message chains with the 3 of them, giving them ideas, giving them suggestions, or just giving them support, and just keeping them going, because it is hard out here. It is hard running for office. It is hard getting the incoming, from the Republican side, from the media, and especially if you're in a primary, or if Democrats are coming after you, it hurts even more that it should be your own family that's coming after you. So I'm going to continue doing that work regardless. And part of that job, and that Won't Back Down, was also to work with the 2024 choice amendment. And so my hands have been kind of on the external right now, as Planned Parenthood and other groups are working on that language for 2024 ballot initiative. When the time is right, they know I'm here to help. And I'm here to help with signatures, to recruit other people to help with signatures, organizations to fundraise, whatever they need. Because I do think that a 2024 constitutional ballot initiative is necessary, because if they don't do a heartbeat bill now, they will absolutely do it in the future. And I know the Supreme Court is going to take away that right to privacy. That was a promise that I made during the primary. That is a promise I will continue to keep, that I'll be working on. Outside of that, my number one goal in life right this moment, and maybe I should come up with new goals for my own personal life, is to make sure that Ron DeSantis never becomes president of the United States. And so I've been working with some national teams, with the blessing from the White House, to be working on, that's not disclosed yet, an organization, a new C4, that is going to basically hold Ron DeSantis accountable, taking the stories that are coming out of Florida that nationally they know about the Don't Say Gay bill, they know about Disney, they know about the migrant flights, but it's every day the attack on democracy and freedoms, that we need to start making sure that we've got smart content coming out of us here. So that way that I don't care if it's Trump or Nikki Haley can use the material, grab it, and try to keep and kill him in the cradle during the primary, and hope that he is not the nominee. So that's really where some of my focus and attention are right now, putting together that team, working to make sure that we're going to get the funding to make, it's going to be like a Lincoln Project-ish kind of operation, with better operatives that aren't going to get themselves into trouble. But that's a focus. And then I'm here for the party. We know we're going into a chair's race in a couple of weeks. And I want to make sure that we're on the right track, because if we don't fix the internal problems, and don't start putting us back together, Humpty Dumpty has fallen off the wall and he's continuing to stay cracked, and we need somebody to pick him up and put him back together. And so whatever capacity that looks like for me, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up on the grassroots of our party. I'm not giving up on and thinking that we can fix this and turn our state back around. That I know who loses when we lose, and that's the people of our state. And I am committed to that because I fundamentally, to my core, believe that the only way democracy works is when you have two strong parties, because that forces everybody to come together. And what we are seeing here is not okay. And we got to figure out internally, because God helps those who help themselves. And if we don't figure it out, the national groups are not going to come back in and fix us. And so we got to be willing to come together and support one another.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Just so that you know, many of you on, turn it off. Just so you know that many of you on this Zoom meeting, that the Democratic Women's Club does do candidate training. So we definitely need to highlight that so that we can begin to turn the tide back blue. Thank you so much, Nikki, for coming on and speaking with us. We always call and you always answer. There's so many gems from what you said tonight that we should be able to take that in. And anything that you need from us, please give our president Regis a call, or give myself a call, because we have got to fix this. We've got to fix this.
Yep. We have to fix
this.
We have to fix it. We've got to be, stopping the siloing of progressive versus liberal versus moderate versus conservative. Yes. We've got to stop, yes, we all have personalities, but we got to make sure like the personality conflicts don't rise to the public and don't prevent, support for one another. We're all Democrats. We might not all agree with every single platform issue, but what does Joe Biden say? Don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative.
I didn't hear. That's a good one.
So we've got to start kind of doing some self-evaluation of who we are as a party, and that we have to understand that if we are ever going to win again, the NPAs and the Republicans have to feel home here too, and feel like their voice can still have a seat at the table here. Right now, they don't, and we saw that result. And so we got to start doing some of that internal, those internal gut checks, if we're ever going to turn the ship around.
I agree. Again, thank you so much. And anyone else that has questions, please put them in the chat and I will send them to her so that she can answer those questions. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Yes. And to everyone, a good night. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Let's see. So what? Hang on. Okay. I need to save. I can